Yesterday we read 10, which was the FBI racially profiling black identity extremists, a made-up thing so they can... It's just COINTELPRO Jr. And then indigenous communities around the world helping to win legal rights of nature was interesting. Okay, number 8. Congress passes intrusive data sharing law under cover of spending bill. On March 21st of 2018, House Republicans released a 2,232-page omnibus spending bill. March 21st, omnibus spending bill. House Republicans. It passed both houses and was signed into law in 2 days. Attached to the spending provisions that made it urgent must-pass legislation was the completely unrelated Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act of 2018, also known as the CLOUD, C-L-O-U-D, Act. Quote, the CLOUD Act enables the U.S. government to acquire data across international borders regardless of other nations' data privacy laws and without the need for warrants, Project Censored summarized. It also significantly weakens protections against foreign government actions. Quote, it was never reviewed or marked up by any committee in either the House or the Senate. The Electronic Frontier Foundation's David Ruiz wrote, quote, it never received a hearing. It was robbed of a standalone floor vote because congressional leadership decided, behind closed doors, to attach this unvetted, unrelated data bill to the $1.3 trillion government spending bill, close quote. Congressional leadership failed to listen to citizen concerns, Ruiz wrote, with devastating consequences, open quote. Because of this failure, U.S. and foreign police will have new mechanisms to seize data across the globe. Because of this failure, your private emails, your online chats, your Facebook, Google, Flickr photos, your Snapchat videos, your private lives online, your moments shared digitally between only those you trust, will be open to foreign law enforcement without a warrant and with few restrictions on using and sharing your information, privacy, and human rights, concluded Robin Green, who reported for Just Security. Quote, the little corporate news coverage that the CLOUD Act received tended to put a positive spin on it, Project Censored noted. Quote, a glowing Washington Post op-ed made no mention of potential risks to the privacy of citizens' personal data, and a CNET report that highlighted the liberties that the CLOUD Act would provide corporations by simplifying legal issues concerning overseas servers. Highlighted liberties. Highlighted the liberties that the CLOUD Act would provide corporations by simplifying legal issues concerning overseas servers, close quote. Because of this failure, U.S. laws will be bypassed on U.S. soil. Because of this failure, U.S. laws will be bypassed on U.S. soil. Green noted that the CLOUD Act negates protections of two interrelated existing laws. It creates an exception to the Stored Communications Act that allows certified foreign governments to request personal data directly from U.S. companies. Quote, this exception enables those countries to bypass the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty process, which protects human rights by requiring foreign governments to work with the Department of Justice to obtain warrants from U.S. judges before they can access that data for their criminal investigations, Green explained. Open quote, the version of the bill that was included in the omnibus does include some improvements over the early version to help to mitigate the risks of bypassing the MLAT process, Mutual Legal Assurance Treaty. Process. Two changes that are important improvements. Many of the other changes to the bill are only partial or ineffective fixes to problems privacy advocates, human rights advocates, and even a former high-ranking official at the U.S. State Department have raised. Several other concerns have been left entirely unaddressed, close quote. Green concluded, quote, while the bill sponsors did try to address some of the concerns that have been raised, the improvements are not enough to shift the balance so that the CLOUD Act will be a boon rather than a threat to privacy and human rights. Again, we are reading from the top 10 list of Project Censored's end of the year stories you might have missed or may have been censored or were hard to find or etc. Number 7, regenerative agriculture as next stage of civilization. Ding. The world's agricultural and degraded soils have the capacity to recover 50 to 66% of the historic carbon loss to the atmosphere, according to a 2004 paper in Science. Forgot to put this light on today. I'll read that again. The world's agricultural and degraded soils have the capacity to recover 50 to 66% of the historic carbon loss to the atmosphere, according to a 2004 paper in Science, actually reversing the processes driving global warming. A set of practices known as regenerative agriculture could play a major role in accomplishing that, while substantially increasing crop yields as well, according to information compiled and published by Ronnie Cummins, director of the Organic Consumers Association, in May of 2017. Quote, "For thousands of years, we grew food by depleting soil carbon, and in the last 100 or so, the carbon in fossil fuel as well," food and farming writer Michael Pollan wrote. I think that's spelled wrong. Quote, "But now we know how to grow even more food, while at the same time returning carbon and fertility and water to the soil." Interesting. Close quote. Cummins, who's also a founding member of Regeneration International, wrote that regenerative agriculture offers a, quote, "world-changing paradigm that can help solve many of today's environmental and public health problems." As The Guardian explained, quote, "Regenerative agriculture comprises an array of techniques that rebuild soil and, in the process, sequester carbon. Typically, it uses cover crops and perennials so that bare soil is never exposed, and grazes animals in ways that mimic animals in nature. It also offers ecological benefits far beyond carbon storage. It stops soil erosion, remineralizes soil, protects the purity of groundwater, and reduces damaging pesticide and fertilizer runoff. We can't really solve the climate crisis and the related soil, environmental, and public health crisis without simultaneously solving the food and farming crisis," Cummings wrote. Quote, "We need to stop putting greenhouse gas pollution into the atmosphere by moving to 100% renewable energy, but we also need to move away from chemical-intensive, energy-intensive food, factory farming, and land use as soon as possible," close quote. In addition to global warming, there are profound economic and social justice concerns involved. Quote, "Out-of-touch and out-of-control governments of the world now take our tax money and spend $500 billion a year, mainly subsidizing 50 million industrial farmers to do the wrong thing," Cummins wrote. Quote, "Meanwhile, 700 million small family farms and herders, comprising the 3 billion people who produce 70% of the world's food on just 25% of the world's acreage, struggle to make ends meet. The basic menu for a regeneration revolution is to unite the world's 3 billion rural farmers, ranchers, and herders with several billion health, environmental, and justice-minded consumers to overturn business as usual and embark on a global campaign of cooperation, solidarity, and regeneration," close quote. If you've never heard of it before, don't be surprised. Project Censored wrote, quote, "Regenerative agriculture has received limited attention in the establishment press, highlighted by only 2 recent substantive reports in the New York Times Magazine and Salon." So that was number 7. We'll take a break and we'll come back later and we'll do 6 and 5.